Are we ready to begin?
Yes, we are ready.
Okay. What we're talking about today, just to go back over, is that practically to prove something by experience is the best way. So in Motherhood 1, through some simple exercises, we have learnt to rediscover a whole way of existing and interacting without any disadvantage that increases our productivity. So Motherhood 1 is the self-evident and self-proving exercises that prove that to all of us. Here today, I will quickly go back over the other ways that we naturally exist, and then I'll try to give an example about how human society, how human beings naturally exist together, and I'll describe the early villages of people. So, to go back over, a human being has a capacity known as the ego, which is an ability to identify to the world without any interference with life or intelligence or creativity. The value of the ego is that it can capture pictures and experience of the past, millennia of the past, as a knowledge base for our behaviours. Although that the past never duplicates itself, it is very useful, and without this ego capacity we would die from not looking when crossing the road. So there is a need for its automatic processes to continue. But we will also talk about how that this static identity has become the human identity today, as in the egotist's identity. In this, what we will establish is that this static identity that uses conceptual language, writing and reading, to share itself in society, is a very different identity than the dynamic identity of the human being. It is a very, very limited identity. And that means we are very restricted by that. So in brief, the human being in a dynamic identity has the experience, and in the experience and in the identity, the ability to act. So as a ego being, there's very little we can do. We can write down instructions for someone else to interpret and do. But we have to come to the actual doing of things. In the experiential world, there are many different levels of doing. As we are looking at human hierarchy as an unnatural act that uses prejudices of people to reduce their ability to do, reduce their ability to be interactive beings, to be community beings, family beings, cultural beings, humanitarians. All those sorts of beings in us would compel us to defend our children's lives with our own lives. And absolutism could never have taken place. You could never have the one ruler of all people. You could never have that. People would stop it. But by reducing the human being, subjugating them to an ego state, lifeless, creativeless, intelligentless, then you had a population that you could control. And the last bastion of that was motherhood, because if you completely destroyed motherhood, you'd have no population. So it is today that we must regain all of that, and hence why the exercises are called Motherhood 1. We have to regain our human capabilities, our human abilities to heal each other. So as a healer, my ultimate aim is to be unemployed, and the best way for me to do that is to teach everyone else how to heal themselves. That's the way we won't have suffering. So in Motherhood 1, what we are learning is how to remove hatred, fear and confusion from ourselves, and to restore us to a natural way of life. Here today I will talk about the natural way of life without human hierarchy. So before human hierarchy took foot, a king was not one who ruled people. It was just an office of service. It was just the place that someone would ring a bell, make a noise, run around and gather the excess resources of the village. The people in the village that weren't directly involved in doing things that could be focused into an emergency type of action, such as the hail is coming and we better go pick the apples. Do we need apples for winter? Or the hail is coming, we better go and get the wood. Do we need dry wood for building new houses for young married couples? So the excess resources is brought into focus through this king ring. And this is not human hierarchy, it is a position of equal to everyone else. So we have to go back to those days of the old types of kingships, not rulerships. So what occurred then in the human being is to explain, and we have to begin somewhere. So we begin in an environment where we have an area. We can call it a barn, a big barn, an area where excess production is kept. So from the barn area we go more away from the centre of the village. I'm using a model here of circles, which is very idealistic, and any real village, it will be dependent upon its location and its geography and terrain. So as we move away from this barn area, we will move, say, further into the apple orchard in this case. So from the apple orchard, there is a lot of production going on, and occasionally they need excess resources to pick the apples. But the rest of the time, apple production carries on at a steady rate, with the most productive people very involved in that. They would then, the production, which is apples and other products that come from the apple orchards, many products, are brought back to the main barn area, and from the barn area they are distributed to another barn area that could be, say, the hunters area, where they bring their catch back, or it could be the woodcutters area where there's wood there for fires and for building houses, or it could go to the fishermen's area where there's fish. And so in any community you have a number of different means of production. This is what we call family. It is not called family in a community because everyone knows whose son, whose daughter the person is. So it remains an unspoken thing. You don't need to tell someone that this is my son. So it remains an invisible word. Everyone knows that. And the community celebrates birth more than anything else. Essentially, human community celebrates children more than anything else, because within the child is this creativity that you can see through the great harmony that you have with a child. Through the great beauty that you can see in a child, it's this incredible love world. And in the great illumination that you can see through the wonder of the child, the intelligence. So it is in any true community that the children represent the future. It represents the way to prosperity through more technology. Everything is about this youth and this youthful production. There is nothing in this, in my opinion, there's nothing in this world that you can serve other than the child of much use. The child represents the freedoms to come, the greater. So it is. So in this community, the different barns are joined together by a small road. And I'm just going to try to draw a picture of how it works there. So on this small road going from one barn to another barn, more the very old people of the community. They are walking around, taking the oxen with the excess, with the apples, and dropping them off there and chatting away as they go. And they're also very experienced, so they know everything about the apples from the beginning to the end. They are experts in that. So of course they have storage technologies. They're the wise ones of the village, known as the village leaders perhaps too. So it is when the king rings that the old people who are near the centre of the village come together. The old woodcutters, the old fishermen, the old sheep farmers, the old apple farmers, the miners, whatever the particular different productions are. And the more different productions a community has, the greater the wealth and the size of the community. So when the bell rings, two groups come forth to answer the need of the excess resource. The older people and the people on this path that joins around. This path we call the kindergarten. The kindergarten is this road. It is a road that these old people walk around and they get rid of bad things like snakes and plant flowers, and it goes on for 100 years. So it's the most beautiful place where the apples are given to this woodcutters, distributed and so forth. It is also in these barns where people go to have babies, because it is the older people that are more easy to look after the young children, to help motherhood, to have babies. And in effect, after a baby is born, the real mother might find herself going back out into the means of production and not staying around where the children are. So in the barns, the children would start to grow, and they by 2 years old they are starting to want to explore more. They want to not only go from the barn into the means of production, but they want to go around the kindergarten. And most certainly by 4 they would have been to every barn on the kindergarten. And in so doing, they also come to their next opportunity, that is to go into the means of production. So example, with the woodcutters' means of production, they can go into where there are small huts for sleeping, for the harder workers, and from the huts you go into the forest more, where we are harvesting the timber of the very strong, experienced woodcutters. This is not a sexist thing. People are unique, and some people have the ability to hunt, and they're good at it, although they're a woman or a man. So it's a question of what real abilities the person has got. And that's very important to understand, because otherwise we're wasting abilities. There are incredible women hunters in this world, most certainly. So let's continue. So into the deeper levels of the forest, you're getting more the younger people who are like 18, 17, who are strong and healthy, and they're learning from the older people who may be 40 about how to knock that big tree down and how to get the tree for the Viking ships and all those sorts of wood technologies. The moss growing on the trees are used as medicines, and all this type of family production of wood. So in these remote areas of production, such as the woodcutter, you've got young men and women, and most certainly they do make love, they do form families, maybe not the normal family of the nuclear family, but they form families, and in the sense of pregnancy, the people do come back to the central barn to have the child in a very secure way, and that's where the children begin from the barn. And most certainly the young woman will probably go back out to the forest in a year to you've asked most young women, they'd be into it. So they're back to doing their thing. In the apples, the same example. So this is the nature of a family. It is the nature of the people that are actually doing something together, and they are near each other because they like to be together. So let's begin at the other end then. So you can imagine that with the children being the great freedom of our world, are not forced to do anything. They want to. Every child wants to be part of a productive world, and the children are looked after by the community. A child doesn't have one mother if they're lucky, like in today's world. A child has 100 mothers. Every person the child meets in that community sees the child as beautiful, wonderful, and harmonious, and has particular light and wisdom to give that child. Wow, what a wonderful world that is. The child is free then to be nourished. Nourishment is different than indoctrination. Nourishment is the freedom for the child to consume what it wants to consume, according to its own freedom that itself decides. So in this way, the child moves around the kindergarten, playing with the wood here, playing with the apples there, and by the time it's 5, it knows all these areas and knows all the other children. But then it gets more strong. You look at a 7-year-old, I want to do it. So the 7-year-old's off to the forest because he likes it, not because he's told to, or off to the apples. And as the child grows up, because they are following what they are interested in, their forte, and that mostly is what we're good at. We often stop not doing the things that we're not good at and go for the things that we're good at. And sometimes the child might be a boat builder as well as a timber cutter. That is what made the original Viking ships be able to travel all around the world, because the wood was chosen to the right shape for that central piece of the Viking ship, and in that way it was incredibly strong. So it is a natural community. The point of what I'm saying is I aim to give this back to people. I aim, now that the absolute age is gone, I aim of organising how we can give this freedom back to people. Motherhood One is essential in this, because we need all of us to start to communicate to children. That is, we have to see them as beautiful, wonderful and synergistic beings. And once we remove our prejudice, we will again, because in fact we'll start to see ourselves as that. And it is that child in ourselves that continues to grow in its expansiveness. It is that child in ourselves that is the powerful being we are. Now, to come back to the original village then. So the child can then go to the apple barn and venture out to start to learn how to grow apples and other sort of product, or maybe the farm where they're doing husbandry of animals and these sorts of levels of production, totally free. And of course the village's direction of development is more along the lines of the intelligence that is there for that village to grow and prosper. And in that way the children become free. They form couplings along things which are of similar interests. The guy and the girl both like cutting trees, so they've got a lovely little tree house down there, sure. And the apple farmers really like to do certain things as well. So when you understand this, I think it's worth trying to give families that back. And I think that Motherhood One, the exercise, making prejudice extinct, is a very good basic step for that. And then there are other technologies. Example is that in Korea they used a dedicated iPod type of device, very cheap device for carpooling. They did a test in one little small town, 10-20,000 people, and it worked very well. They did another test in 3 towns, and it was so popular. It was you enter that you're going to the pool with some children and you carpool. And what they discovered was that by carpooling, the families found that other kids were interested in swimming too, and these kids were interested in that. So carpooling has proven from this device that there is a fabric and a technology that we can actually rediscover and redevelop the kindergarten. So we are in an incredible age now where we are not restricted by the actual physical kindergarten, and we do have a time where we can have this kindergarten that will allow our children to walk around the means of production of our community. Now in our world today, what are those means of production? And it's not that difficult to understand. There's not that many differences. There are simple basic means of production. There's arts, there's engineering, there's exactly that. So in this way, by allowing the children freedom to develop themselves in the modern kindergarten, we allow children to really express the intelligence that they are, rather than having them be super intelligent and knocking nails into pieces of wood for some silly reason that the absolutists would have people to do. I think that would be a stop there. Do you understand that story?
Not all of it. How do you think what you're talking about is probably could occur several centuries ago, right? It actually existed.
A millennia ago. Call it a millennia ago.
A millennia ago.
It still occurred here. I did my research in Austria. My forest there's a main road between the Danube and the Danube, from Vienna to Wachau, the main road. They put castles in it. The knight runs this castle. The bishop runs this castle to move the goods. Little roads went off into the mountains. And about 150 years ago, the serfs in the mountains were still animists, and they were then coming back into meet the society, the main road, and they were called serfs. So as they were then indoctrinated, because someone said, I own all the land, you are mine, and the rules of serfdom was that they could keep their land as long as they did some work for the owner. And this is how you had these massive farms occurring. A lot of people wanted to be animists, had nothing to do with modern bullshit. But eventually you had what they call urbanization. And urbanization really comes from the serfs, who are animists, not really Catholic, moving closer to the road and becoming Catholic, as in Austria, in order to get money so they can buy other products. And in this way, serfdom led them to then be moved to Vienna itself. And in Vienna, you'll see, like most of Europe, you'll see where serfdom took off, where the person was given clothing and food and shelter, and they were obliged to work. And when the Duke did not want them to work, they would just starve and freeze to death. So Europe has been tyrannically ruled for millennia. Total terror, total fear, total violence, total confusion, total torture, and total hatred. So don't make any mistake about that. You've had a millennia that you've been reduced to a prisoner in an ego surrounded by prejudice. So the thing is, in the modern world, they would say, oh, you're evil, innate evil. The Catholic religion is a Christian religion in the 7th degree. Look at canon law. The church comes first, appeasal of the powers comes second, blah, blah, blah. It's a political organisation, not a spiritual organisation. Although some Catholics may be Christian, and some of those may be true Christian too. So there is this incredible, terrible things that were done to Europeans by the absolutists, by not only using weapons, guns and swords to slaughter villages, warlords making deals and pacts to slaughter each other's people. Look at First World War, Second World War. No one can argue against the insanity of the rulership of Europe, the one God, one ruler, Holy Roman Emperor, blah, blah, blah. Just insanity, the megalomania of Hitler, or even to a degree the rebuttal by Stalin of megalomania. So the reality is today that today globalization rules the world, and globalization can't be really changed. And globalization basically says, and it's true for everyone that exists today, you have to solve problems, or you're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to produce. So the old system in Europe were following orders, doing what you're told. Forget it, you're dead. At the moment in the world, I would gather that the European is, the American's 5 times more productive than the European in real terms. And the Chinese is 5 times more productive than the American. So there's no place on the planet for people that can't produce. And the only way that Europe is going to survive is if Europeans learn to be productive. And that is learn to solve problems. Duplicating the past is not a form of production. In absolutism, yes, get the guy to carry the rock, build the castle, great. Carry the rock around, yeah. Slavery. So in the modern ego identity, what you have is process. People are indoctrinated to do a process. They follow that process. That is called thinking, they say. No, it's indoctrination following that process. Example, driving a car is such a thing. You have rules, you have certain behaviour you must follow. That is a mechanical process. It's not a question of thinking. This is how most people live. It's why in today's world you've got a high level of psychiatric problems, despair, depression. It's as we have been identified, society is falling. It's finished. So it's good then, at this time, that we discover that people can be free. Now, the reality for the human being is that the devices used to subjugate the human being, to oppress them, to steal from them their consciousness, their abilities, over millennia, can be easily healed. What I am saying is that production can go up 10 times. I'm saying that violence can go down, crimes can go down 90%. And I'm saying, in effect, people can be 10 times happier. And it comes down to a very simple reality, is that when a person is terrified, they will internalize, they will run away from the terror, which is on the mind level, and they'll run to the ego space, and they'll internalize fear. Call it darkness. They stay away from the mind itself then. In the ego, they're internalized it. A fear, a brick, call it dark brick of fear. And on the life level, when a person's tortured, they will internalize a brick of hate. They'll run away from the living world into the ego again and have this hate. And when a person has violence done to them, the harmony is destroyed, they run away to the ego and they have confusion. So these dark, cold bricks, hate, fear and confusion, are something that takes our consciousness away. It absorbs it, it binds it, and it makes this cold brick. So for most people today, they don't see anything but an ego world, and they would say that going beyond that is crazy. The simple truth of it is the exercise in Motherhood 1 reveals to people who are interested that there is this reality to their life, there is this cold, dark bricks, and that by looking at them, they start to dissolve. By looking at them, they start to become more clear what they are, until you get to a point that you might see yourself surrounded in these sorts of things. It doesn't get that bad, unless it already is that bad and you've got no choice. So it is. The magic of it all is very simple. The magic is just to turn back on the natural healing ability, and that is something that has not been restricted in human beings, to how to turn that back on, and that comes back just to beholding true beauty, which is a bridge between the little world and the big world. What do I mean? Life is universal. Life exists everywhere. Life knows life and nothing else. Life can only feel life. It can't feel anything else. So life is this world, as I have said earlier in this, the empathy, sorry. So with the two worlds, you have to understand that from the universal life, in ego, you don't even have any life, do you? When you're completely absorbed in an ego world, there's nothing as life. It's just doesn't exist. But most of us aren't that crazy. Most of us really know when you kick your foot and it really hurts that you're alive, or when you really see something that's beautiful and you cry because it's so beautiful. And that is the difficulty, is that at any time people come to start to discover the true beautiful world, they are taught it's evil, they turn around, they're taught that the hatred they see is something that is ongoing. But it's not. The hatred that you start to see is something you can digest. And this is the reality. So what I'm saying is that from a millennia in Europe of tyrannic rule that has been then socialized onto the children, that is a devoted mother, whether male or female, not only pass on their true love, but their hatreds. Not only their true illuminations, the way that they have light for the seeing, the reasoning in all the world, but they also pass on their fears. Not only do they pass on their synergism, the ability to join a group productively, but they also pass on their confusions. And this is why we are born with such an enormous socialization that keeps us very asleep. It's not a question of going off to yoga classes and learning meditation or enlightenment, all that stuff. Motherhood 1 only takes us to a very new beginning for our humanity, free of prejudice. From that beginning, so many things, enormous incredible possibilities for the future. That beginning of humanity is simply getting rid of the past crap out of our system. And it's not that much work, because we're going to use a natural method that turns on the healing of it. So what I'm saying is that once you learn how to go beyond yourself, that is, go beyond your ego state and start to experience life, intelligence or mind, and synergism or creative production, creativity, you'll start to like it. You'll start to be empowered by it. And the more you go into those dogmatic ways of existing, the more you're going to be productive. Your production will go up, your harmony will go up, your timing will form sequence. You'll start to find, like my friend asked me about telepathy earlier today, but you'll start to find that you innately bump into the right people. You happen to be in the right places. But at the moment in your life, you are still reduced to this ego slave consciousness, which is fixated on genitals and gold, which is not really you. And you know it's not you. You know there's a greater world than that. But do the exercises of beholding true beauty, true wonder, and true harmony. And what happens then is that you invite the wakening up of the child inside yourself. And in that way you start to see the universality of life in, say, a child, or in a flower or a tree. So you have universal life is what we could say as humanity, one being humanity. And then we step down into something more unique or more individual, you could say, more about you, yourself, little self, and we have culture. And there's many different cultures then. And from that we step down again to another lower level, not really lower level, different level called community. And we all have different communities then. And then from that we come down to family, and we have different families. And from that family we come down to the unique person. So what I am saying is that once we remove prejudice, you'll start to have these experiences of being a co-creative being. You'll start to not only be fully a unique being as you are today, but you'll also be a co-creative being. And that is like in a family where you are directly connected to other beings consciously, and you're interrelating. So the family is a living being. There is no boss, there's no ego king. The ego can't exist in the family. The ego can only exist in the unique being as a tool for each person. And in truth, the ego, if you look at it from a Zoroastrian point of view, which is the central idea of one God, Sarosa, then the Judaism, then the Christians, and then the Muslim, all one God, is all based on this idea of the ego. And that is that when the ego is completely free of prejudice and it's completely empty, then we find that we can reflect the whole universe. And that is what we are as human beings. But we have to go a long way to get this freedom. And at the moment you're not there. At the moment you're just beginning. At the moment all I can do is give you exercise that after a week you'll start to go, there is something there. And after a month you'll be really actively involved in meeting your fears, that's what's inside of you, meeting your hatreds, that's what's inside of you, and meeting your confusions, that's what's inside of you, and getting rid of them. And in doing this, what will occur is two great things, is that you'll reclaim consciousness, conscious abilities to be in tune, intuitive, abilities to go, my wife's going to ring me, pick up the phone. Abilities like this will come back dramatically. And the exercises also give you a very clear footing on what co-creative levels you can be interactive. So as we progress in consciousness, in a dymatic consciousness that I'm talking about, we also find that we exist on different levels. We exist in a family being, a community being, a cultural being, and it's a question of removing that bad things that happened to us, the terror, the torture and the violence that destroyed our consciousness in the humanity and reduced us to culture, destroyed it in culture and reduced it to, and it has squashed us right down to the ego, and it would have destroyed us, but it would have destroyed humanity, but have no people, as actually is the case in Europe. the European Union's future is to be a Muslim state, because the Europeans that live here are producing about 1.2 children, whereas the Muslim families that are here are producing 8 children. So it's a matter of 30 years and you'll be a Muslim state for sure. But this is not a consequence. I'm not being religious or anti here. I want to get rid of prejudice, so that in fact we get rid of organised religion and we regain our conscious reality, our experience of being a unique being with all the powers of that, and also able to act as a co-creative family being. And you'll discover that is a whole level of ability to do things that you don't even see the production of. Simple example is I'm walking to the shop to buy some milk. I pick up a hat because the wind's blowing. A man can get the hat and catch a bus to see his mother. I open the door for a man carrying a big box and he can get inside. So synergistic production can mean that you are in the right place to help production. And at the moment, while you're still into this ego state of being, you have to understand that industrialization has finished. It doesn't allow us to survive anymore. We have to be more productive than that. Industrialization is ego production. That is, you follow the process. And even the more ingenuitive information technologies, like the Japanese with 10 people build a car, we all take pride in that. They have reached the maximum of their productiveness. The truth is that all those forms of absolutism, of egotism, of these ego productive methods are failing. They don't work anymore. They still work, but what you need to get is your freedom back to be able to produce as communities, as families, and as cultures, and as humanity. The exercises will bring you about where you start to rediscover this consciousness and rediscover how you fit into that. The first part of the exercises then bring you by you taking the decision that you want to try, just for a week, where you go into asking yourself the question is, are you alive? What is life to you? And I don't mean being intellectual and going around and around and around. What I directly do mean is the feeling of life, the feeling of love. And I would argue that you could call this true beauty, and that feeling of that is a sense of falling or going beyond oneself. So if I look at something truly beautiful or see the universality of life in another life form, such as a tree or a flower, I feel I go beyond myself. I fall in love with that tree or that flower. If I see it in a family, then I am producing love and becoming a loving family. That's normal. It's the same thing for community. And by going to this next level, by beholding the beauty of the child, we can behold the beauty of the community. And in this way, we actually are allowing our energies to be dynamic, allowing ourselves to be a sympathetic, compassionate, and true loving being, empathetic, understanding and illuminating being, a responsive, creative, synergistic being. And in these sense, remember, synergism, the total is greater than the sum of the parts. To look at it this way, 1 + 2 in a family doesn't equal 2. In the modern family, with arguments, with prejudice in the way, it equals like 0.7. It doesn't work. But in a synergistic family, 1 + 1 equals about 5. So if you start to realise that getting rid of the prejudice allows your consciousness to re-emerge, and it allows you direct capabilities of interacting and being productive, which means your productivity goes up dramatically. 1 + 1 = 5 gives you the production to have lots of kids, 2 or 3 kids for easy, no problem, that's natural. And then you take families and you go 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. In the families, it's not like 7 1 + 1s is 7. No, it's like 125, the level of productivity that goes whoop. Industrialization was just a way of ripping it off to the very most basic elements of it. So today, this is what the European Union needs. It needs that because it will get squashed if it doesn't give up egotistic thought and megalomaniacy. Again, it will not win a fourth world war, whether against itself or the world, with megalomaniacy. Forget it. So humanitarianism is the only way to go, and the best way to go that is to make racist hatred, prejudice, xenophobia, all these stuff extinct by removing prejudice. Prejudices are easily removed, as I'm saying. They're removed because we start to ask the question again. For 5 minutes, you find true beauty. You get some pictures in your head or something that you find as true beauty to you, where you feel like you go a bit beyond yourself. It might begin in a bit of a, not much there, but it's all you got. So you know you're alive. Look at the true beauty just for 5 minutes. Just think about true beauty, something truly beautiful. For that 5 minutes, it begins a path. It might take a whole week for it to open up and you go, wow, I really felt that I loved that bird, that eagle, because I was looking at it, it's beautiful. Whatever you might find as true beauty, it might be a child, the next door neighbour, it might be... So true beauty is a recognition of the universality of life. And in doing that, something else happens to you. Something else. You feel a movement. You start to get your dynamic being, your dynamic consciousness. You're not going to be an emperor. You're not going to be a ruler of the world. You're not even a ruler of your own body. You think the ego rules yourself. You most certainly are not a sports person. You are certainly not a research scientist. You are certainly not successful. These people who are successful understand that the body has its own reality. There is reality, and we have to serve that reality if we want to serve ourselves. So this is the truth of it. And it's easy to allow yourself to be free by doing this exercise, say, with true beauty for that 5 minutes. Because what will happen then is that you'll start to see what makes you hate. And the thing that stops you from seeing the universality of life in every other human being is hatred. If you can't see the true beauty of every human being, there's only one reason you can't do that. There's hatred there. And it's not yours. It's a millennia of hatred socialized. But it is your job to turn on the healing mechanism that will get rid of it. And what that means very clearly is that you want to live, then start to understand clearly that life and love are the same thing. That it is the same universality of different levels: vitality, passion, exuberance, empathy, sympathy, compassion, true love. We are human beings, we are this. And then true wonder. Again, what stops you from seeing the truly wonderful mind and intelligence in other beings, other human beings? It's fear. Nothing else, it's fear. You got to get rid of that fear. And also with synergism, what stops you from seeing that in other human beings? This creativity, this creative interactivity, that interconnectedness, that is confusion. You've got to get rid of that to have certainty. Certainty, I am human being. Certainty, I am part of a family that's interconnected. Without my interconnectedness, I would not exist. I am part of a community. The community is a little bit different today. It might not be that particular village. It might be drummers or research scientists or media personalities or this sort of thing. The exercises take you that you start to see or perceive what stops you, that what keeps you restricted in your consciousness. By the end of the first week, you will come to a point that you will feel the fear that's inside you already. You will stimulate that freely with a very powerful thing, true beauty. Sorry, in this case, true wonder. And by true wonder, you behold the mind on the intuition, reasoning, insight, empathy, understanding, illumination. You'll start to realize that you have light, that you can create light, that you can make life, that reasoning needs to get around. You are a human being. So what stops all that is fear. Fear is taken over that part of your consciousness and made a prejudice, buried it. And that was done to you to subjugate you to the absolutist. The time the absolute's finished, you've got to get rid of that. And here are the easy way to do it. Behold true wonder, the universality of the mind itself. And in beholding that true wonder, what will occur is that after this week exercise, you'll be at the position that you'll see that there is fear inside yourself. You'll still be confused and all this, but slowly, please. This 7 years' time will have prejudice extinct on the planet. And it works very easily. So, true...
How many people would do it?
It will happen. True wonder, true harmony takes away the violence that internalises the confusion. So when you see true harmony, you might not understand that one a bit. What is true harmony? I think true harmony might be if you can imagine that in the modern world that you wanted to go somewhere and you jumped in a taxi and then you used money to buy things. True harmony is when you're working that team or in a football team and you're all as a group. True harmony is when things just working really well. So again, you've got to discover true harmony, your experience of it, and begin your journey to find true harmony in yourself and behold it in the world. So 5 minutes, what is true harmony for you? What gives you that feeling of going a little bit beyond your ego space? What gives you that feeling of coming across some confusion? So straight away, you've got some confusion there. So at the end of the week, remember, you do it 4 times a day, spread them out, every 6 hours, so to speak. And 5 minutes on true beauty, 5 minutes on true wonder, 5 minutes on true harmony. Just concentrate, keep on bringing your mind back. We'll talk more about how to do that in very simple exercises to make sure you sit with your back straight, with your sit properly. And but we'll talk about that somewhere else. So by doing this process for this 5 minutes 4 times a day, the 4th one is just to try to let go and breathe in and out and just relax and be conscious, just to be still, just to if you do that 4 times a day, what will happen is that you'll start to experience, most certainly by the end of a week, you'll start to feel your fears around you, you'll start to feel your hates around you, and you'll start to feel your confusions around you. Now, if you're not courageous enough to face these things, no problem. Don't worry, help's coming to you. It's all right. But a lot of people have that courage and that strength, and really the exercises are self-controlled. You won't get more fear or hate or confusion than you can cope with. And it is all of the past, and it's not real. It's only real to some distant relative that had their head chopped off and the mother screamed. Maybe a 1,000 years ago, that pain was put there. We're just releasing it now, and in releasing it, releasing your prison. We're releasing that part of your subconscious to become conscious. And by beholding it, by feeling it, seeing it, that's all you need to do.
How do you release it?
Well, by beholding it, just the act of beholding it. It is just the act of seeing the fear. And you go, aha, there's fear there. That releases it. So the more that happens, I don't say create the fear, but the more you meet the fear. Don't create the fear. Don't go and terrorize someone. No. Don't go and do the bad things. And that's actually what keeps it going, you see, because while people got prejudice, it actually self-propagates. And that's why these exercises will reduce violence, crime by 90%.
I think we are much used in our society to suppress things. Hence, we will automatically, as soon as the fear arises, the automatic reaction will be to suppress it back, to do something.
That's exactly right. And this is why in Motherhood 1, the exercises give you the confidence to know that that is the opposite thing we're doing. We're not going along this absolutist trip of, run away from the evil. It's all evil. It's Satan coming up to control you. No, that's crap. What it is you're meeting something that separates you from the world, separates your life from your life, separates you from your mind, separates you from your creativity.
So what you propose is just to acknowledge that.
That's all we need to do.
Not do anything about it.
You don't need to do anything about it. That's right. The doing is the beholding, the concentration, that's all. And what happens is that feeling of going beyond yourself is digesting the fear. You feel the fear because you're digesting it and it's gone. You feel the hatred because you're digesting it and it's gone. So as you progress more and more, after 1 week you'll make a decision that you want to progress in these things. Now you do it for 3 more weeks, so after the 1 month for the 4 times a day, 4 focuses, you'll be in a very strong habit then. That's why it takes discipline. You'll be in a very strong habit of digesting this stuff, and that process goes on all by itself. It does mean in a sense that your world will be a little bit uncomfortable compared to now, but would it? Would you prefer to be sitting there sucking away on a Big Mac, or I'm not very happy today, or working, thinking, why am I doing all this work, when you could even be more productive? No, it will make your life easier. But the thing is that you have to get your courage back, and we're going to give that to you with these exercises, Motherhood 1. And it's also the time in the world, there's enough people out there that recognize that we are free, that we have life, that we have intelligence, we have creativity, and we have the right to freedom. So psychological emancipation is very simple. I'm delivering an exercise on a mass level that does it by turning on automatic natural healing process. And these natural healing process is like our innate motherhood. Men and women can be mothers. We can hold babies. We can love. We're not soldiers and nuns. No. So the reality is, by turning on the natural processes, the digestion goes on, but you become aware more clearly of what your objective world out there is for what it is, on the different levels of unique, family, community, culture, humanity. On those different levels, the different interactable levels that you can act on. At first, you don't notice anything and you don't know how to act on them. But it most certainly isn't a stupidity of ego being, I want to be the god of the family, I want to be the boss of the community. No, that's crap. You become the community. It's a co-creative being. You go beyond your isolationism. You don't lose your unique self, but you become a part of this being that you are completely freely involved, putting your passions that transform to love into making the body of it, putting your reasonings that are transformed into illumination, the light of, and putting your synergism, which is your creative productivity, you're putting passion and reasoning together, your creative productivity, into synergistic productivity, which is the means of production of the community itself. So you're actually regaining the ability to produce. So you have to understand that as much as you've got eyes and ears, and hands, and on this level, you also have eyes, ears, hands, and all that on other levels. And it's a question of relearning. Forget mysticism, they mystified everything. Wake up and you'll start to realize that you exist as these different sorts of beings. And the exercises just give you a bit of a roadmap so you can start to get in touch with that. You won't be able to rule it. It won't be, I am the megalomaniac, I'm the next Hitler, or I'm the next god of myself. And those people that want to try all that, you won't do these exercises. You can go off in your own little world. Fine. But the other thing that occurs is that not only do you automatically start to heal yourself from these things, you are also beginning to see the world in a greater and greater true beauty way of being a beautiful world we live in. You're falling more in love with it, and you're becoming more capable through that action of loving the world to actually achieve things. You are falling into bliss with the world of the mind, and in that way you are becoming more capable of doing things in the mind of the world. So this is why your empowerment, your ability to produce, goes up dramatically. The other thing is that the old stupid thoughts, like, you know, the young couple have a problem, like the girl cries, he rang me and said we're not together anymore. All this is ridiculous. In a relationship, people build a relationship. They don't just have that. We build a relationship. And general rule is about half the time you take to build it, you take to destroy it. So it doesn't matter if the boy rings you up and says it's finished. That's fantasy. That's an ego crap. The reality is that relationships take time to dissolve. We build a family, and it takes time to destroy a family. And it can only be destroyed if we're let it, if we stop being part of it. No one else can take it away from you. And it's the same thing for community, the same thing for culture, and the same thing for humanity. Also, by getting rid of prejudice, we don't see other cultures and communities and families as threats. So therefore we are more able to work in comfortably with others. Synergistic production goes through the roof. Just when I say this, the exercises mean that you yourself become a more illuminating, loving, synergistic being to everyone around you. And this heals other people. Those people that these exercises were too difficult, those people that when they start to really come across some deep things of the past, start to scream in terror. When you've got loving, illuminating, synergistic people around them, that it's not perceived as violence and terror and torture coming out of that person. It's perceived as they have a sickness, and we share then to help heal that person. We love, illuminate and synergize them, and by doing that we pull the fear, the confusion and the hatred out of them until it's gone. It's healed. You don't heal it by sticking that person into a box and saying you're a bad prisoner. You don't do that. That's insanity. So we learn to heal the world. We're learning to heal yourself. We're learning to really come to the way to be responsible, dynamic beings. And unless you want to be responsible, dynamic being, you can stay in an ego prison and go through, I feel like I'm in a small, dark, cold room with no windows and doors. You can do that. The exercises only bring you in contact with what that prison is for you, and it gives you the so easy device that just makes the prison walls disappear. And it makes it disappear according to how much you're willing to behold true beauty, how much you're willing to behold true wonder and true harmony.
But still, a form of ego is left, isn't it? Because in order to have some kind of ambition,
of course,
you
yes,
need ego.
of course. See, we're not really talking about the ego in the sense, because the ego is very vital for us. It's a great thing to have an ego that's so free that you can imagine remembering every book you ever read or remembering every experience you had. To have such a powerful ego which is capable. You are capable of having that. That's what the ego does. It lets you see into these photos, so to speak, of the past, the way it's held. In mysticism, they call it the Akashic records and all this stuff. But I'm getting rid of all this mysticism. I'm saying that this is the time now to open up the mind. So in this, when the ego's free, all these abilities are there. So what we're talking about is what surrounds the ego, because we have ran away to the ego to survive. When the torture's been too much, we ran into the ego because there's no life or love in the ego. You can't feel torture in the ego. When the terror is too strong for our reasoning, our bliss and our minds, yes, we ran away into the ego because you cannot feel intelligence. There's no fear in the ego in that sense. There's no mind. There's no terror. Yeah? Do you understand?
In the ego.
So the ego is not alive, it's not intelligence, and it's not creative. It's just consciousness. And we ran away from our world because of torture, terror, and violence. And until we say, hold on, what happened? Sometimes you might be lucky, you go home, you've got someone that loves you, and your hatred is healed straight away. But we're talking about a millennia. We are talking that the European was squashed ruthlessly 24 hours a day for 1,000 years.
Who designed this?
that's a different approach to look at why we have that problem. But today, no one wants this problem anymore. The people that created all this and propagated all this don't even know that they've done it or doing it. Hitler didn't even know where it came from. He sort of egotistically saw it as a powerful thing. So by taking away the prejudice, we allow the ego to be very clear, a very clear way to see the world, a reflection of time itself, and we allow ourselves to become going beyond. We don't lose ourselves when we go beyond. We still are ego, but then we go beyond into that family consciousness, which we are then able to share with other beings.
Question. What happens if again, somehow, somebody comes to conquer the land where all this peaceful community lives?
Well, the exercises don't change you. They don't make you less. You don't lose your ego. You don't lose your thoughts or your mind. All you lose is the arrogance. All you lose is the ignorance. All you lose is the stupidity. All you lose is the hard way of seeing something. You know, it's like, you know, if you were a man master with 40 women under you and you went, women are too dumb to do anything intelligent. What you're losing, if you're the only person there, is everything that women could be doing besides cleaning the floor. You could have engineers, you could have big castles.
So you can still go into war, just with greater awareness.
Of course, you could have war. The difference is that, of course, you still able to defend.
Because it's a normal question. The first thing when you talk about releasing of fear and hatred, the first thing that person might think is, I become like vulnerable.
You become vulnerable in the sense that no longer are you willing to follow Hitler or Stalin or some crazy nut. And anyone who says that Europe's history, World War I, colonisation, World War II, is a good idea, is insane. Because Europe will not conquer the world. Sorry, I know you're Eastern Europe and you're new to Europe. But Europe has always tried to rule the world viciously and violently. England, France, Germany.
Everyone, no?
Yeah, but they will not do this. Americans are not really Europeans.
I mean, Americans, I think, are ahead of everyone on this planet.
Chinese are today.
Ahead of trying to conquer this world.
No, because it's not about conquering.
They have the most wars in the last century. I mean, they are the main aggressors right now.
Well, I don't know if it's not a realistic idea to actually think that someone's trying to conquer the world. Because on one hand, you're trying to say such persons would benefit from such a thing.
They think they would.
And there is no benefit in such a thing today. It's a delusion, because megalomaniacy itself is known to be an insanity.
The what?
Megalomaniacy, like, you know, Hitler and Napoleon and Stalin in this sense. Today, everyone knows that's just ego sickness. And there's no great ruler. I am the ruler of everything. Yeah. No one wants to do that.
That's why everything happens undercover. It's not now obvious. It's not like we're going.
Exactly, but those people aren't interested in what this world domination is, because it is controlled. The world, the battles are finished. We have globalization, and it's here to stay. You're not going to get rid of it. And globalization has two simple rules. The community, the village, can be productive, creatively productive, and survive, get rewards for it, and survive very well, or it can die. This is the globalization we live in. If the village is not creatively productive, it has to look after itself. If it cannot feed itself by some production, it can starve to death and die. So if the European doesn't start to wake up and realise, again, you're Eastern Europe, so it's a little bit different, but the European has lived for the 400 years of exploitation of what the Holy Wars were about, going to steal, wasn't it? The Crusaders was nothing but about stealing. It was about going to Israel and butchering innocent people to steal gold. That's what it was about. Steal land and gold. There's no nobility to it. The holy wars were an insanity. Look at the first great devastation to the world. All of the Middle East was covered in cedar forests. It wasn't desert. Some parts were desert, but most was cedar forests. The Crusades chopped all those forests, great forests, down to build things to attack castles with. So this is a whole delusion. There's no great enemy. There's no Satan out there. There is only one problem, is that some people aren't creatively productive, and there's no room in the world for people who can't solve problems.
But these people don't care about that.
They will die.
As long as they get money. The point of exploitation is,
but there's
is
more
to
than
get
enough
funds.
money for them to have.
But the greed never stops.
But it does stop.
The greed comes to more greed.
Do you think so?
Sure.
You can only eat so much. They know that. They might want power, yes, but it gets very boring when you can buy any car you like and be better than anyone you like. It becomes a little battle between themselves, so to speak.
You think it gets boring?
Well, I don't think the billionaire drives his $2 million car down the street to actually impress the guy and the girl who's working in a local shop. No, he doesn't do it for that reason. That's ridiculous.
Maybe it's more about the game.
He does it
The game of control.
Yeah, but who cares about that?
They?
Who
Wants to control. The control
And you
is
think
one.
they're out to kill you?
Kill me.
You think that there's going to be a
no,
war?
we don't matter to them, just like animals don't matter nowadays.
But do you matter to yourself?
Of course.
Right.
Or not.
Exactly.
Depends on
Exactly.
The, on
So,
the strength of
without
the
going into the politics of all that, they don't care.
I'm just thinking.
They
that-
don't care. Globalization is the
just-
ability to be free today as humanity.
I'm just saying that I think you're not too much realistic about thinking the world can change like that, because
It has changed. Empires are gone. There will never be a holy Roman emperor to rule everyone. That will not happen. The European dream will never happen.
that it can take.
The Chinese aren't going to launch some great one to rule the world. No one else has done it. Only the Europeans have ever done it.
Well, maybe technology will allow a new
No,
level of
and the
control.
Europeans have been destroyed 3 times. And if you try it again, you'll be destroyed again. This is a problem in Europe. The Europeans do not realise they created megalomania. They created colonisation with guns and weapons. Look at the Americans, 100 million people, far more than in Europe. They butchered them. Gone. Look at the Europeans did this. And the people that no one's going to care about is the Europeans. You've had your Hitler, you've had your First World War. First World War, power is right. Europe lost, power is not right. Equality, equality of arms, freedom, equality is the rule. People died to give you that. That's why you can walk around free today. You have to be intelligent, reasoning, thinking, not imaginary, I philosophize of this. You have to be actively intelligent in creating the pattern. You have to be passionate, putting the energy into the pattern to produce. And you also have to be synergistic to produce in harmony with others. So world peace is easily achieved, and we will achieve it. The only difference is in this process, because we will get to this point that prejudice is gone. What's important is the way we go about it. Now, the way we go about it from Motherhood 1, these exercises that work, is that we start to dissolve them in ourself. So we start to turn ourselves back on in a very simple way that people could go, but that's like being enlightened, or that's like paying gurus.
Wait up. How
It is.
How did you get this system? Did you go through it yourself entirely?
It's
How did you develop it?
obvious.
Ah, okay. So you came to it logically.
It's obvious.
Well, I mean, of course, the opposite of hatred is love. So think about love and maybe...
No, hatred doesn't exist. You cannot fight hatred. You cannot fight fear. You cannot fight confusion. You can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it. If you try to do anything about it, you're making worse job. So if you try to teach people yoga and you're trying to teach them or meditation or empowerment trip, you're not really helping them. Maybe, but more likely you're not, because what happens is that they're just learning how to cope with these things, or how to use their hatred to direct them, how to use their fear and hatred. I will succeed, I will get there. But that is not freedom, and it doesn't actually empower them more than if they were free of the things that were hatred, because the power is still there. Hatred, fear and confusion are not real things. They are something from the past that has interfered with your life today, that has to be looked at, recognized and digested.
So you mean real as in you think them only, and if you stop thinking them, they are gone.
It's like saying that 400 years ago your family was in a little group traveling somewhere, and some people came along and knifed bloodily all your family
let's
to death.
Reincarnation
And no, we're not. No, we're not talking reincarnation.
You're thinking genetic
We're talking
memory.
socialization. Basic fact.
What does fear of my past folks have to do with me today?
Well, the person witnessing that was filled with a terror, a hatred, and a torture from that.
So he passed it on to his kids.
That is automatically passed on until it's digested.
Okay, I got you.
So if you don't want to digest it, you're going to be trapped in that. And when people understand that there's three types of things that they got as repressions: their own personal life, very bad experience that were too difficult to cope with, they repressed. Number two, the socialization of experiences from their millennia. Remember, your life goes back a millennia, doesn't it? 10 millennia? You're as old as Stone Man, aren't you? Really, your life.
Who?
Your life, your physical inheritance is as old as Stone Man.
Stone Man.
Yes.
Me.
Yes.
Why?
It's called hereditary. You came from someone. Do you understand?
Okay, Stone Man. I got you.
You had a mother and a father in a sense, or you had two mothers in a better sense.
Yeah, of course. But so I mean, someone actually have to die to digest some experiences, because many people are dying because of their stress, because of their way of thinking.
Well, man, the people are dying because they're not in contact with the fact that these prejudices are things easily digested, because the world is taught to do the opposite thing.
Suppress.
No, the world is taught to force everyone else to be dehumanized and subjugated, to serve the emperor.
Rather than their own emperor inside.
No, because they're just slaves. They're not psychologically free.
No, I mean they are given the idea to serve someone, some figure, instead of their own light, so to speak.
Yeah,
so
yeah. In that sense,
their eternal emperor.
well,
What I mean.
people it's about ownership. You
But
see,
hold on.
people
where
aren't the
does it
property
come
of
from?
someone.
Where does it come from? Why the first person gets an idea that he wants terror to happen? Isn't it that the evil is somehow inside our nature?
No,
Where does it come from? That
someone
wish
had an
to hurt
idea.
someone?
They tried it. It worked well. They suppressed humanity into an ego state. But the age of megalomania is over.
But
The
I mean,
only
how-
place
how does it
megalomaniac is
appear?
going to come from will be Europe. Do you
How
understand?
How does it appear? How does the first European get this idea and thinks it's a good idea?
Well, we can explain how these things can occur. But again, my point in these exercises, it's not about people who want to think and go round and round and round the circle. You either do the exercises, you start to get in contact with your fear, your hatreds and confusions, then you work through the exercises and get rid of all your fear, hatred and confusion, then you can ask the questions. Or you can say the exercises don't work for you. It's silly to say that you want to be blind and go, I will imagine if I'm not blind what I would see. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like you want to imagine what it's like to be an empress or a king or a billionaire. It doesn't work like that. That is imagination. It's a complete waste of time. It's not even fun.
Okay.
Fun is more likely going for the drive in that nice car because it's part of your imagination. And that's more likely that there are enough good people with those sorts of cars who are in contact that will let you jump in and go for a drive with them. Yeah, sure, you might get a few people go, we want to keep the elite cars. That's globalisation. That's a different issue. But the notion of ownership is under challenge today. The economic system, the social system of the world has crashed. That is the Western world. Not the Chinese world. That's a different one altogether. Not the Indian world, not the South American world. And I would even say not even the Americas. The Americans will reinvent themselves. They're predominantly non-European. So they will reinvent themselves anyway. The people that will suffer the most, it won't be the Russians. They've been fighting for freedom since day one. Do you understand? It will be the Europeans. It will be the Germans. It will be this group, the English. And remember, England funded Hitler. Without the English bank funding Hitler, there would be no Hitler. Remember, the Blue Bloods were the World War One. Colonisation was this. So the only place that megalomaniacy and world domination has come from is the idea of the Holy Roman Emperor. Someone who says, I will rule the world, I will be God of the world. This, the Pope type of trip. Today you have the Pope and you have what? You don't have a Holy Roman Emperor yet, again. But before, a long time, it was the same person, the Habsburg. Bang, that's it. Now that was a phase that we have gone through. Whether you want to say it's good or bad, I don't care. I'm looking at tomorrow. I'm looking at what we can do today to make the world a better place. And for you to have less hatred, less fear, and less confusion. For you to go about turning on the motor that takes it out, opening up your mind, and maybe get some telepathy happening there. Maybe you'll start to go, oh, I've got to go home because my wife's at home. Or you go, oh, hold on, my boyfriend's coming.
I just like to understand things.
So you'll start to tune into what you really are as human beings.
Yeah, I understood completely.
Good.
You're going in circles right now.
Yeah, I'm going to eat the cake. Have a rest.
I just like to understand things. That's why I always think from all the sides. For example, I'm just thinking, why do we even get so much interested in this, what you say doesn't exist, in this hatred, in the ego system? And then I remember your words that you said, we get interested
because
in
we've escaped the living world, because the torture to us in the living world was too hard to bear. So for a moment, the body, human being, responds. We run away.
Yeah, I got it.
Like when I was in prison in the forest, couldn't get out, was starving, freezing. My body would be so exhausted that I couldn't get down the hill to a pizza guy that would give me some food. Yay, good guy. Now, I was in so much pain and so exhausted that I couldn't walk. So I couldn't go. I lay there for the whole... Is that me?
Nah. That's music, man.
So, sorry. So I couldn't go. So what happens then is that when the torture gets to a little bit higher point, you enter a stage which is psychotic. Not crazy, but detached from your body. And that allows you to go boom, 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 down the mountain, down the hill.
That's not you, because
not me.
It doesn't ring, so...
I just knew.
Short period.
So that allowed me to do
seconds.
it. So this is the survival mechanism that allows us to bury our life experience. When the torture's too much, we bury the life experience by making that conscious experience, that conscious part of our being, our consciousness, subconscious.
Exactly.
And we bury it.
So we don't feel it,
And
right?
so we don't feel it. So when we let it out, when we unbury it, we feel hate. So if you go, oh, that happened to you, you go, oh, it's so bad, it was really bad, you feel a hatred. So if you know what is really happening, and you let that hatred out because you know what it is, it doesn't have to be, oh, you'll do, I'll project my hatred onto you, and I'll beat the crap out of you and spread the hatred. So straight away people start to become responsive to take responsibility for their subconscious mind. And most people in Europe understand they've got a subconscious. Freud's been pretty successful so far with that. So understanding you take some responsibility for your subconscious mind and what's in it, People go, I don't want to be responsible for my subconscious mind. That was my parents and their great-grandparents and history. I don't care. But it is your mind. If you don't want to take responsibility, fine. Don't use it. But just because you don't want to use your mind, your life, and your creativity, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And just because people are dehumanized and they don't know how to use it anymore, it doesn't mean it's a fantasy. So by taking away, letting out the feeling of the hatred in the positive way, letting out the fear in the positive way, letting out the confusion in the positive way, you're releasing the prejudice from the subconscious, regaining your conscious. And the exercises I've given are so simple, anyone can do it. Europe will not succeed in a fourth world war. Europe hasn't changed much. And all you've really got in Europe is a lot of people murdering everyone over and over and over again. The law is non-gender role discrimination. If that man wants to stay home and look after his child, fine. If that wife wants to go and work, fine. So why do you want to put your shit of it unnatural, it's against God, all this crap on it for? Or he's not the hunter, he's a woman. Why do you want to make all that? Why do you want to play this stuff for? Why? It's only because you're insecure, and you're only insecure because of hate, fear and confusion. You have to go through that. When you get rid of all that, you'll just go, people are unique, people can give this, or they can give that, they can't give everything, but they can just give something of themselves. And 25% of women should not be at home with children. Forget it, they're not interested. 25% of men most certainly are really good mothers. They'd be better off at home with the kids. It's a little bit different than a woman-mother thing. Yeah, you make houses. It's all about talking to the child. It's all about interaction. But the problem you've got is you probably even look at children as dumb. Children are... Do you know that in the first year of life, you will experience more than the rest of your life? Half of your life is finished. Conscious experience in the first year. Do you understand?
Yeah.
The second year, half again.
Okay, yeah.
So the first few years of life is incredible experience. So some children are better off with some devoted mothers who are male. Some devoted mothers can be female. It adds the freedom. And this is the freedom that we always had. Sure, some people are born with broken leg. They can't be the hunter. Right? Doesn't mean that it's bad to be the mother. You live in a world that mothers have been butchered.
No, yeah, I understand.
The first mothers that were butchered was all the male mothers. We're not talking about gay people. We're talking about men who are humanitarian, who are loving, who are willing to defend with their lives. You know, I told you my analogy with the dogs. The man who's willing to defend the child with their life is a devoted mother. But most men aren't like that, and most women aren't like that in Europe.
In your terminology.
In my terminology, and if you look up the law, you'll see non-gender role discrimination. So it is the law. This is EU. It is the law. But you can't abuse people anymore. You can't use violence to force people to be something that serves the emperor and is insane. Europeans are and were for 1,000 years insane. If you can't start to wake up to that, Europe will continue to go backwards. You will not win another war.